Welcome. Oh my goodness. Audience, first of all, thank you, Father, for the day. And thank you for the opportunity to have a beautiful conversation with an incredible human being. And I say human being because our guest today, Sharyll Burroughs, she is all about humanity and prioritizing how we are humans first and created by God. And it's so important to think of that before we break down into, yes, beautiful groups, sometimes wonderful groups, but the interaction of all those groups, what we have in common is our humanity. And she focuses on the art of humanity, and she does workshops, and she's a mentor, and she's a creator, and she is all about love and goodness and kindness. Um, I'm thrilled for her to be here. And I always want to remind y'all, number one, you're appreciated. And number two is you matter. Your story matters. And you have unique God-given gifts that I'm going to call you out on to grow and to share. So always you're welcome. Send me a note, get on here. But here we are today for a wonderful conversation with the lovely Sharyll Burroughs. Welcome, Sharyll.
Oh, thank you, Carol. And it's such a pleasure to be here. And I look forward to our wonderful conversation today.
Oh my goodness. Well, here we go. Art is, and this is a quote from you, I take it, and you start everything that with art is humanity. And we need to start there in order to be able to hear and listen to one another, to start at what we share in common in order to have deep and beautiful conversations. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, people perceive art, and this is not incorrect, that art is a painting that hangs on the wall, or art is a sculpture that is in a museum. There are many, many, many definitions of art that are authentic and real. And what I'm trying to say is that life can be art as well. The way that we live our lives can be art and can be qualified as such, particularly in how we relate to one another.
Hmm.
And I would say, obstacle that gets in the way sometimes of relating to one another is the bodies that we're in
Sure.
and the definitions that are attached to those bodies. Um, so when thinking about art, it is I would say, more connective way of uh, relating to one another, because
Mhm.
then you're not so caught in these ideas of what people are supposed to be, how they're supposed to act, what they're thinking based on the body that they're in.
Mhm.
So when we come together and we're thinking of each other as art, then our connection is art as well. We are creating art as we are interacting with one another. And I think that that's an interesting way to see each other in the world. And if everybody did that, especially if we're trying to create some idea of the good in all of us, and what are we going to do to be the best human beings we know how to be, I think that could be a very vital change for the world, particularly now in this particular, let's call it, situation that we're in.
Our environment, right? I
Our
couldn't agree
environment.
more. You know, whether it's a painting or a beautiful song or something we read, art is interpreted, presents, and we receive it with feeling and emotion, and we all receive and feel maybe similarly oftentimes. However, it is a unique perspective for each of us, any type of art. And 100% our lives, we are leaving footprints. We are creating art and how we live out our lives, even how our conversations, what we choose to think about, where we dwell, because we're sharing energy, right? So I
Yes.
love your perspective and starting there because, yes, so many of us, and there's this saying, and it's true, but this is also very interesting. Birds of a feather flock together. Even that statement is talking about the differences and what's alike in different groups, if you will, of birds of certain feathers. They look the same, they fly the same, they, you know, eat the same foods oftentimes. It's very interesting, and I love the humanity as art. So, Sharyll, give us a way, if you will, a tool that you share with so many of your clients, whether that be within a corporate situation. I know oftentimes you go into businesses and you and work there, but you also do individual work. And give us an idea or ask us a question that you would do in those situations to help us grow our perspective and get to humanity rather than groups, if that makes sense.
Well, the first conversation would involve asking, what is your story? What story do you believe about yourself?
Hmm.
And then as we are exploring what that story is, I would ask, well, do you think that part of the story actually belongs to you? Or, I mean, was that something that emerged from you naturally? Or was it something that your parents expected from you? Or your teacher expected from you? Or someone outside of yourself had a story of who they believed you are and
Hmm.
imposed it onto you. And when we're kids, we don't know that this is happening. We are in situations where we want to please adults, we want to please our friends, we want to be a part of a group. But the predicament and the problem with that is that we are often assigned definitions that have nothing to do with us. It's the other person's version of who we are.
Hmm.
So we take that on. So in the conversations, the initial conversations with clients, we really get to the heart of, okay, let's go down the list. What is it you believe about yourself? Is that true? A lot of people say yes, that it is true until we find out and we pinpoint, well, where did it come from? Did it come from outside of you or did it come from within? So it's not therapy. I'm not saying I'm a therapist, but there are more conversations, I believe, that need to take place, particularly in this idea that we are all carrying stories that don't belong to us. And we
Mm.
don't know that until our life starts taking a turn that's unpleasant, or, you know, we all have situations where things don't work out. And how we handle those situations is sometimes connected to us not being connected with who we truly are because we're using all kinds of information that is flawed. So if you're using flawed information to fix a problem,
Mhm,
then the outcome might not be what you want or what
mhm,
you expect.
mhm,
So it's a challenging but also enriching experience, because the more people talk and the more that they realize that they have a choice in what they believe about themselves, then all the doors and the windows fly open. And
Mhm.
that's when the real work begins, because now they can take the truth of who they are into whatever is happening in the workplace or whatever's happening at home or whatever, and address it in a completely different way. The outcomes don't necessarily always, it's not always a white picket fence or the perfection of what we would like,
Right.
but the turmoil that we felt when we were living a false, I call it identity,
Mhm.
is not so strong. It's not so overwhelming. It's not, I mean, I can just speak for myself. There have been instances in my life when people said things and they weren't true, and I knew they weren't true. But what that does is it takes you out of yourself because you're so busy defending who you are and your position and so on and so forth. So it takes you out of yourself. So if you're out here flailing around, it's hard to become grounded again. It's
Mhm.
hard to become rooted in whatever your truth is. So
Mm.
in a nutshell, that's basically what I do. And it's an ongoing process. It never ends. There's no destination. We are infinite beings. We are multidimensional beings. And there are also aspects of who we are that clash, that are contradictory, the yin yang, so to speak. I'm not saying dark and evil and not nice and all of that, but there are elements that we all have within ourselves that maybe we don't like so much. You know, I
Mhm.
got impatient with a friend about a month ago,
Mhm.
and I wasn't very kind. I wasn't very kind, and I was very disappointed in myself because it didn't have to go there. I just got impatient and said something that wasn't very nice. So I had to work with that because the
Mhm.
first thing that comes up for me is shame.
Oh, yeah. Shame shame spirals are real.
Shame spirals are real. I like that. Shame spirals. Yes,
We're gonna
they
do a
are
book
real.
on that. I hope you'll add to it, but it's the truth.
It is real. And there's been a lot of work. Brene Brown is a person that's very
Yeah,
famous for doing work around shame. So
she's
there
awesome.
are things available to help with dealing with shame. But for me, shame was a big part of my childhood. So in thinking about how I treated this friend, um, for 2 days, I really was locked in uh, punitive talk to myself. Uh, I'm not worthy. I'm not this. I'm not that. But in truth, I was making it all about me as opposed to looking at what had actually happened. So it took a little bit, but I was able to get a better grounding in what actually occurred and what I wanted to say to her in apology. And I was able to do that. So she was very gracious, graciously accepted my apology. And we've known each other for 40 years. So it's not like this hasn't happened before. But we have these moments where we get to say, huh, is that the best human being I can be?
Right,
Is that the
right.
best I can be? And that's a great measuring tool because then you can decide, do you want to go up or do you want to go down or do you want to stay stagnant, you
That's
know?
right.
So as I said, this is an ongoing process. It uh, there's not a destination. We will continue to evolve and grow, and as I said, it just depends what direction you want to go in. It's up to the individual.
You know, I love that, and I love you sharing that experience. Thank you, because I do believe that when we share our own experiences, we're able to give an example in a manner that the I know the audience feels this way. It allows them to listen with an open mind and heart rather than kind of closing that door because it might be about them. This way we're able to think about this, right? Um, I think that what you have just shared, it reminds me of, it's nice being a grandparent because when I get to talk to my grandkids, I'm going to say we get kind of a second chance to say things differently that we did. I, I have three, thank you, Father, incredible children that I always am apologizing to or telling them to add it to a list for their counseling of the things I may not have said correctly or done. However, with these grandkids, it's so interesting. They share, you just sit back and you listen and they share so beautifully. And I've loved being able to ask the question when they tell me how they, just out of a story, how they reacted to something. Because, like you're saying, I get to say, how did it make you feel to react like that? Because from your story, I know that's when I literally get a feeling, this shame or shame spiral, it affects me physically. I literally have a feeling something's not sitting right because of my reaction, regardless if it's how I felt. And what I wanted to say is really kind of what I wanted to say, but let's say I didn't say it kindly or in a manner that the other person could hear it or whatever. There is a feeling just like art. It gives you a feeling. So, back to what you said, I do believe life is art. And art is humanity, and art is very human, and it gives us a feeling. So I love this so much. And with your practice, I know when people get to work with you, they're able to open up to the questions. Like you said, that we're ever evolving. And they get to ask these questions and then choose. Hopefully, we get better and asking the questions before we speak or act or react to someone else's living out their art, their life, right? Hopefully we pause. Do you believe that pause is always a great tool before we
Yes.
react?
Yes, I do. I do believe in pausing. I'm not very good at it.
We're always getting better. Now, Cheryl.
I always say to myself, okay, next time I'll remember to pause. Yes, pausing is very important. However, this when people are working, the workplace is a system, and there are rules within that system. And the reason the system works is because everybody's adhering to the rules. So, in thinking about pausing, if there is a pause, you have to keep it to yourself because it has to be like an inner process in terms of how your brain is relating to whatever is going on, where you need to pause. Because sometimes we don't mean to, but we enact in a way that people can feel something's not right because they've been working with you or you have a particular persona. People can feel that something's off. So it takes practice to sort of go through whatever process you're going through, but keep your energy to yourself so that it doesn't throw off whatever's happening out here. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is possible because what you're really doing is you're observing what's happening. That's the
Mhm.
pause. The pause is the observation. You're,
Absolutely.
obser- you're observing what's happening as opposed to being a part of what's happening. You're separated yourself from whatever's going on. So you're able to sit back or stand back and see the mechanisms that are happening. And then whatever comes to you just helps you not interfere with it or interrupt it or because often when we're pausing, people are feeling like we're not part of the process. You're not part of the team. You're not taking one for the team kind of thing. It's an expectation in so many places. So I don't know if that was too complicated, but
No,
the answer to your question is
it's actually wonderful that the pause, if I heard you correctly, it's the inner pause. It's the observation of what is
yes,
happening and allowing that to take place before you become
yes.
part of that piece. I'm going to say of that piece of art that's being created. Um, my team and I talk about going into the garden. Often I'll say, okay, now right now, I'm just going in the garden and I'm letting you know the seeds that are being planted. We do it like that, and we'll weed and we'll talk about and fertilize later. But just so you know, this is happening in my inner garden that we're all part of. And I think that I hope so much that we're getting better in our one-on-one conversations as well as within the workplaces. We're getting better at listening. So people are starting to appreciate the pause, the observation. We're becoming active listeners and not, so often, and I know out of fear or wherever it came from, different things, but well, fear's an easy one because everyone gets it. But I know oftentimes I didn't want to listen to someone finish something because it might interrupt what I've gotten on going
Mhm.
on in my mind that I'm trying to share. And what a gift to realize what a gift listening and pausing is, and observation. And again, to the grandchildren, I always say, just observe how people are sharing and talking and playing and not sharing and not talking, what rules they're breaking, what are their consequences. Observation, which I love, we're relating to pause here, is a beautiful thing. And yes, I believe that people, although I agree that people are like, what are they contributing here? I think that is kind of turning to, wow, we've got ourselves someone who is actually listening and observing and pausing before asking questions or contributing. I'm hoping kind of you know, the forever optimist, um, hoping that that is a transformation that is happening through people and companies working with you, working with people that share what you share. In order for us to find our own truth before we respond.
Well, it is art, as you say. It is the thing that is difficult to communicate to people is because we've been so entrenched in what art is. As I said when we started our conversation, a painting, a sculpture. Um, I do something called performance art, where I go into the public. I don't announce it. I set up a table and have a few little accoutrements and invite people to sit with me, and we exchange for 2 minutes. It's a controversial word that is exchanged. And then there's a little exercise after we're finished. What I didn't anticipate is that after this performance, people had a story to tell me, something that had happened to them.
Mm,
It didn't necessarily involve the word we were exchanging, but it was a
mm,
situation in which they either misunderstood a person based on how the person looked,
mm,
or they were misunderstood based on the body that they were in.
mm.
And I can't tell you how many people had to tell me a story. I just did a talk about 3 weeks ago at a meditation center. And it was a different subject matter, but the same thing. People came up to tell me a story. So this idea of making art with our lives, the interactions of people coming to me because it's the first time they felt comfortable enough with being vulnerable enough to tell me their story.
Mhm.
And the relief I can see after they finished telling me the story. There was one
Mm,
gentleman, I asked him, "How long have you been carrying this story around?" And he said, "About a year and a half."
mm, mm,
I said, "You've been thinking about this for a year and a half?" He said, "Well, it was such a dumb mistake. And I, you know, so this is what we do. This is what
mhm.
human beings do. So we have to learn to forgive ourselves, first of all. And
Right.
then the art of forgiveness, the art of vulnerability, the art of sharing, the art of taking a risk to be authentic. And I hate because authenticity has become sort of this catchphrase, but I'm going to use it anyway. Authentic, authentic, being themselves.
Yes.
It is dangerous to be yourself. It is dangerous to be yourself because there is always going to be somebody that's going to tell you what's wrong with you because you're not acting or talking or being the way that's comfortable for them. So, in
I'm
thinking about, go ahead.
well, I'm so I can't wait till our next conversation because for this particular conversation, because I want to make sure everyone knows how to get in touch with you. Of course, all of that will be in all the links and all the things, but um, I'm so excited. I want you to share what you're working on right this minute. And also, I want to point something out. One of the words you used towards the end of what you just said was, we have to learn to forgive ourselves. We really do. And I talk with I have 3 kiddos, and I'm not sure that they love always hearing me remind them that their life is a masterpiece and they're the artist. And all our actions and thoughts and reactions and all the things we're creating this masterpiece. And it's going to have some really moody, deep, dark stuff and some beautiful sunrise, sunset colors and all the things. But we do have a choice. And I think that what touched me is when you said we have to learn to forgive ourselves, as you shared with that gentleman who had been carrying his story for a year and a half before you all spoke. What a gift. And I know the audience, such an incredible audience. I am so grateful for each of you, wherever you are all over this planet. I love that Sharyll is reminding us to forgive ourselves and forgive the other person. I always share, and if I haven't in a while, I'll say out loud, let's just pretend, I forgive Sharyll and I forgive myself. And my husband and I, everybody calls him MVP, in our prayers, we very fortunate we get to at least 5 mornings out of 7, we're able to say a prayer of thanks and, you know, all the things, but we both say, I forgive you and I forgive myself for anything up to that moment. It is such a gift and it's such a beautiful piece of the masterpiece. So the yucky parts you might not like all of a sudden are infused with this beautiful, whatever the color is, this light. So Sharyll, I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you, I know, for that gentleman, for all of our audience, and for myself, to being a person that allows others to feel safe to share. I know the
Well, thank you.
companies and all the people that you visit with feel that, but in case anybody hadn't said it, I want to tell you thank you.
Well,
And
thank you.
wow,
I, 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 I do have a gift for what I call holding space. I hold space for whatever needs to take place. And again, I want to stress I am not a therapist. This is not about me solving people's mental problems or
Oh,
childhood trauma or all of that. I'm more focused on helping people access parts of themselves that they did not know existed. So together, we just do a big exploration,
mm,
and that uncovers whatever falsehoods a person is carrying around, and then they can release all of that. They may not know, let's just say, what they are, who they are yet, but we've identified what's not working. So now there's space to grow into who you truly are.
mm,
So the idea of, again, art, I also use art as prompts to help people. Usually it's a little bit uncomfortable, but that's okay because that's going to push you out of your comfort zone enough to help you get to the truth of what it is, however, or I'm sorry, whatever it is that is meaningful to you about yourself.
mm.
So, art plays an important component in the interactions with clients as well. My art, other people's art, sometimes it's a film clip, sometimes it's an actual piece of art. I just used in this last talk that I gave a photo of an object that's called a collectible. It's called Black Americana. There were objects that were made many, many years ago with stereotypic images of African American people. I collect those objects. I started collecting them as a way to release myself from the definitions of white supremacy. It was a very involved process. It took many years, but I am able to offer these objects depending on the client, not everybody, the clients that can handle it. And we deconstruct the
Mhm.
lies that this object contains.
Wow.
So if you can access the lies and understand that it's used to manipulate people into believing things about themselves that aren't true, then that changes the way that we interact with things because we're looking at it from a proactive perspective rather than a victimized perspective.
Oh my gosh, we've got ourselves an entirely new conversation to have. So we're going to do this again. I hope you'll join us again. And I just, again, audience, Sharyll Burroughs coming to you. I mean, come on, art is humanity. Sharyll, thank you for what you do. Thank you for joining us here today. And audience, again, remember, you matter. Your story matters. And you're an incredible child of God. So thank you, Sharyll. Thank you, Father. Until next time, hook 'em.